in the country. That will produce quality graduates who will generate innovational technologies that will serve the Filipino people. For years, CEAT has been recognized as top-performing school in various engineering licensure examinations, awarded by the Commission on Higher Education as a Center of Excellence and Center of Development, an AUN QA certified, and a National Center for Agricultural Research, Development, and Extension. CEAT is part of the Engineering Research and Development for Technology program of the Department of Science and Technology, a consortium of 8 universities offering mature engineering graduate programs. The program aims to address the lack of highly trained researchers, scientists, and engineers, and research and development engineering activities in the country. The college actively participates in different social events in the university to strengthen unity, cooperation, and smooth relationships between students, faculty, and staff. In the years to come, CEAT will continue to take greater leaps to achieve continuous honor and excellence.
Good morning, everyone. To formally start our webinar today, may I call on the Chair of the Department of Chemical Engineering, Dr. Monet Concepcion M. Detras.
Okay, sorry. Hindi ko ma-unmute kanina, Sir RC.
Go
Okay.
ahead, Mo.
All right. To our distinguished participants, faculty, students, and to our speaker in today's webinar, good morning. I'm pleased to welcome you all to the first webinar of the CEAT Founding Anniversary webinar series, focusing on one of the completed projects implemented in the Department of Chemical Engineering. It will be presented by one of our distinguished professor in chemical engineering, who is an authority in biofuels and life cycle assessment research. Our speaker played a crucial role in making the biofuels and bioenergy the leading research field in the department in terms of funds generated, manpower, and scientific outputs. For today's webinar, our speaker is going to discuss one of the outputs of the UPLB Interdisciplinary Biofuels Research Study Center and the UPLB Life Cycle Assessment Laboratory, which are both attached to the Department of Chemical Engineering. So I will not further preempt the introduction of our beloved speaker and the presentation of details regarding this webinar. I believe that everyone in this meeting room is excited to hear from our distinguished speaker, and I am confident that everybody will learn a lot from this webinar and will also get inspired by the works of the department in general. Thank you very much and wishing everyone a fruitful day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Detras, for that opening remarks. So I'm Dr. Ramon Christian P. Eusebio, your moderator for today. So that the College of Engineering and Agro-Industrial Technology is celebrating its 109th founding anniversary with the theme Future-Proofing Communities Through Engineering Innovations. As part of this year's celebration, CEAT is conducting a series of webinars presenting the different projects of each CEAT degree program. Today is the kickoff of the CEAT webinar series, which is hosted by the Department of Chemical Engineering, just for today. Okay. For today's topic, we will be focusing on the biofuels in the country, which is very relevant nowadays, especially that we have now the enactment of Republic Act 9367, or the Philippines Biofuels Act of 2006, mandating the compulsory blending of biofuels in gasoline and diesel sold in the Philippines. And we are very fortunate to have a resource speaker with us who is an expert in biofuels. Our speaker for today is a Professor 12 at the Department of Chemical Engineering. He is the chair of the UPLB Interdisciplinary Biofuels Research Studies Center and also the chair of the UPLB Interdisciplinary Life Cycle Assessment Laboratory. He will be presenting their project entitled Assessment of the Philippine Biofuels Program's Contribution on Greenhouse Gas Reduction of the Philippines. Without further ado, let's all welcome Dr. Rex B. Dimaphilis. Good morning, Sir Rex.
Good morning, everyone. Can you share a screen?
Okay, you can share your screen now, Sir Rex.
Disabled, still disabled,
Okay,
still disabled. There you are.
okay. Thank you, Sir Rex.
Thank you, thank you. let me settle first in screening my sharing my screen, and then I'll make a introduction. Okay. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present our research outputs under the UPLB Interdisciplinary Biofuel Research Study Center and UPLB Interdisciplinary Life Cycle Assessment Laboratory. The researches covered one focus area, which is on biofuels and the National Biofuels Program's contribution on greenhouse gas reduction in the Philippines. I believe this is the first time that there is a national assessment of the biofuels program's contribution on greenhouse gas reduction. And I would like to thank, of course, first of all, the department in supporting me and my team in all of our researches, and also the UPLB Central Administration for giving me the opportunity to lead the both centers from its inception in 2014 and 2017. Thank you for the support also of our biofuels team and life cycle team in handling these six research projects funded by six uh, funding agencies, four of which are local and two are international funding agencies. So this output, of course, is a product of so many teams, basically six teams of biofuels and LCA teams. And this covers about 5 years of output of the Department of Chemical Engineering. To provide you a little of historical background, it was in 2016 that the administration of Chancellor Velasco created niches and themes, and one of which is the Alternative Energy Committee, which I was appointed as convener. It's convener.
Ayun.
And because of this, we thought of coming up with a biofuels lab in the department. And with the help of the faculty and research assistants, and of course, our colleagues in the whole UPLB, especially the College of Agriculture, Forestry, Economics, help us develop programs and got approved proposals. For the life cycle assessment, we have life cycle assessment in the department even before. It was not recognized, but in 2017, the um, the administration felt that it is high time to establish the UPLB Interdisciplinary Life Cycle Assessment Laboratory to provide support to the different interdisciplinary study center in coming up with life cycle assessment studies on the different aspects. It could cover agricultural and manufacturing. It could cover services. So the the life cycle assessment laboratory of UPLB was born, and we're very glad that a number of our colleagues in the university, both in the faculty and reps rank, supported us, joined us, and of course the big help of the Department of Chemical Engineering as well as the College of Engineering Agro-Industrial Technology Administration. So let me present to you the outline of my presentation. First, I would like to provide you a little background of biofuels industry in the country. Second, I will introduce to you the Paris Agreement on climate change and the Philippine nationally determined contribution, its relationship. Uh, Three is I'll give you a little background on life cycle assessment, the framework, the methodology, and number four and number five, these are now the outputs of the two interdisciplinary study center with It's not shared. Oh, in the screen. RC, are you not seeing my slide?
Not yet, Sir Rex.
Paano? Let me see. Why?
Okay, Sir Rex, we can see it
Okay,
now.
as if it was the introduction. Anyway, that's just really the introduction.
Thank you, Sir Rex.
Again, thank you for giving this opportunity and of course the help of our teams. So can you see now my slide?
Yes, Sir Rex.
Okay, share this. Okay, so again, this is my outline, the outline of my presentation. First, I will introduce to the biofuels industry of the Philippines and the status. Then I would like to introduce the Paris Agreement on Climate Change and the Philippine National Determined Contribution on Global Warming.
Okay.
It's better. So I got a good help here from the research assistants. Okay, and third is the introduction of life cycle. And fourth and fifth, these are now the results of six projects funded by six funding agency for both bioethanol and biodiesel carbon footprint and greenhouse gas emission reduction potential for the country. So let me start giving you the status of the Philippine biofuels industry. First, I would like to touch the Biofuels Act of 2006, or we call it Republic Act 9367. The law mandates for biofuel blending in all fuels sold in the country, primarily to reduce dependence on imported fuels, but it has also other drivers other than energy security. So specific objectives are the following: to develop and utilize indigenous, renewable, and sustainably sourced clean energy sources, of course, to reduce dependence on imported oil. The second objective defines another driver on environmental protection, which is to mitigate the toxic and greenhouse gases emission. And today's presentation focused on greenhouse gas emission reduction potential of the biofuels program of the country. And third, to increase rural employment and income. Basically, all of these six projects focus on socio-economic and environmental aspect. However, today's presentation will just focus on the environmental aspect and defining the greenhouse gas potential of the country. And last one is to ensure availability of alternative and renewable clean energy without detriment to the natural ecosystem, biodiversity, and food reserves of the country. So there is a safety net even for the production of renewable energy, even for the reason of going into less dependent on imported fuel. We want to protect the food reserve of the country. That is basically explicitly spelled out in objective number 4. So, since there is a mandate blending, it's mandatory. Uh, where are we now? When we started the Biofuels Act in 2007, 3 months after the implementation of biodiesel blending of 2% started. While after 2 years, the bioethanol 5% started. Um, in 2012, the bioethanol increased from 5% to 10%. However, the biodiesel was not increased. And supposedly, based on the National Biofuels Plan, in 2015, the increase should have been already 5%. So up to now, our biodiesel blending in all diesel sold in the country is still at 2%, while we have a 10% bioethanol blended to all gasoline sold in the country. It has been projected also, planned, based on the National Biofuels Plan of 2012, that in 2020, there should be an increase already of bioethanol blending to 20%, or we call it E20. No? Um, and for biodiesel, it should be at 10%. We call it B10. Sorry, in 2020, 10%, we call it B10. So currently, we have still the 10% blending of ethanol in the country and 2% biodiesel blending in the country. Now, I'll be showing to you ethanol producers in the country, and there are 12 of them. Six are located in Luzon, and another six located in Visayas. Basically, we have four in Negros Occidental and four in Batangas, with a total ethanol capacity of 380.5 million liters per year. All of these ethanol producers or ethanol distilleries are using sugarcane or sugarcane based molasses. Out of these 12, nine are capable of using sugarcane. Sorry, out of these nine, three are capable of using molasses. Um, so they could combine both sugarcane and molasses as their feedstock for the production of ethanol. Then for the biodiesel producers, so far this is the number of cocoa biodiesel or biodiesel producers. But last week we had the updates from the Department of Energy, courtesy of Engineer B. de Guzman, that I think there are 13 and the total capacity reached already the 700 mark. But these 11 biodiesel refineries has a total output of 614.9 million liters per year. Later, I will show to you the relationship of these capacities, mandated volume needed, as well as the availability of feedstock. Out of the 11, four are located from Mindanao, or in Mindanao, and seven from Luzon. Basically, there are three in Quezon province. So we can see now the totality of our capacity to produce biodiesel based on refinery capacities of 614.9. Now, about the Philippine bioethanol situation, let me start here. Cannot see my cursor. The accredited is 12 in the middle of the upper table. There are 12 with a total capacity of 380.5 million liters per year. However, you can see on the bioethanol demand outlook, ito ay projected ito before. And again, last week, the Department of Energy through Engineer de Guzman provided us the actual 2019 consumption. But looking at this bioethanol projection in 2020, we need about 847.61 million liters of bioethanol. Now, looking at the last column of the upper table, in 2018, as of December 2018, the total production was 295.54 million liters per year. Now, if you compare the total annual capacity and the needed volume, you can see the big discrepancy that our local production could not suffice the mandated volume needed to have ethanol blended in all gasoline sold in the country. And if you look at the same table, upper table, sorry, hindi lumalabas, the production output of 200, mamadali ah. In 2018, last two columns, the 295.54 production output, a little bit lower than the total capacity, it shows there is problem on raw material, or in biofuels language, we lack feedstock. So basically, this will be shown later. I'll show you the balances on the effect of feedstock against the capacity and against our mandated volume for our blending requirement at 10% bioethanol. So again, that's the situation of the bioethanol industry in the country. We lack capacity relative to our mandated volume, and we lack the feedstock with respect to even the capacity, much more to the needed volume, blended volume requirement. So how about the biodiesel? And this is the situation. If you would notice, the accredited annual capacity is already at 614.9 million liters per year. However, if you look down the table, the projected biodiesel requirement is only 575.07 million liters per year. In short, sorry, that is already at 5% blending, because currently we are only at 2% blending. So even at 5% blending, our capacity at 614.9 could suffice the needed volume for blending to all our diesel. Here in 2018 production output, it's only 219. It's not because we lack the feedstock, but it's because of the mandated volume that is needed approximately in that number. Like in 2019, it's only 214.6. So the bioethanol situation is different from the biodiesel situation. In bioethanol situation or industry, we lack the feedstock and we lack the capacity. But here in biodiesel, we have so much capacity. And later I will show you, we have so much feedstock for the different blending, even at 5%. So let me proceed. The raw material, or we call it feedstock, basically, as I have mentioned, in the Philippines, we use sugarcane or sugarcane-based molasses. As I have mentioned, out of the 12, only 3 are capable of using the sugarcane stalks, and the rest are totally dependent on molasses, or that is the byproduct in sugar crystal production in the Philippines. Now, this is just an approximation that we can produce 70 liters per ton of cane or sugar cane as the conversion yield. The agronomic yield of sugar cane in 2017 and 2018 is 66.5, but the rest of the year, probably in the vicinity of 5 years, the average sugarcane yield national is all just barely 60 tons per hectare per year. So this is the main feedstock of the Philippines. Is if we have a total, PSI star as invert, if we have about 52 of this percent in molasses, it could produce about 245 liters of ethanol per ton. Or in our last discussion with the industry, it's about 250 liters ethanol per ton. So the common numbers or yields used in ethanol production, that's 245 tons. That's 245 liters per ton molasses and 70 liters ethanol per ton cane or ton sugar cane. Now let's proceed with next. How about for biodiesel? Again, as I have mentioned, we totally use coconut. So a ton of copra is equivalent to 0.63 tons of CNO. This is your crude oil. So it's 63% oil, in short, can recover in your copra. While for simplicity's sake, 1 ton of your oil produces 1 ton of biodiesel. Of course, we have some efficiencies, and we have shown that in the experiments in our laboratory runs, we could not get really the 100% conversion. But for simplicity, we are using 1:1 ratio. Now, let me proceed to the challenges of the Philippine biofuels industry. Um, these are the challenges so far that we have seen: insufficient feedstock supply. Later, I will show you the balances, but in the case of bioethanol, I have shown you based on the production output capacity as well as the mandated volume needed to for our biogas for our gasoline blending. Then the local pricing. This might be new, but I'll show you the price differences of bioethanol and biodiesel in our local production, as well as the historical prices of biodiesel. Hindi ko lang na-print yung historical prices for the local bioethanol. And three, I would like to discuss this one. Are the objectives being met? So are the objectives of the biofuels law being met in our national biofuels program? So here comes in this presentation in evaluating the greenhouse gas emission reduction as one of the specific objective of the law. So in short, in this presentation, you will see how far are we, and what are the potential, and what are the action plan um, that we should do so as to meet the objectives, or at what point are we meeting the objectives so far. So here is the feedstock supply. These are the numbers that I have mentioned. Well, I have shown you earlier that there is lack of bioethanol feedstock or raw material. I'll show you the numbers so that this is simple balancing. Numbers of the feedstock capacities and the mandated blending. This is the very reason why the UPLB Biofuels Interdisciplinary Study Center is working on alternative feedstock. So we're working on other feedstock that could complement the sugarcane and sugarcane molasses to increase our capacity. It has been a long and tedious work, and we are very fortunate that the Department of Agriculture through Bureau of Agricultural Research commissioned UPLB in 2010 to do the commercialization and adoption and of sweet sorghum as one of the alternative complementary feedstock to sugarcane and sugarcane molasses for bioethanol production. I'm using the 2017-2018 harvest. From the harvest, the total molasses produced is 1.13 million tons. As a rule of thumb, the molasses is about 4% in terms of tonnage with respect to the tonnage of sugarcane. So 4% of the sugarcane stock is approximately the amount of molasses that will be produced as byproduct in sugar crystal production. Now, the molasses could produce 276 million liters of ethanol. So as you have seen earlier, per ton of molasses, for simplicity and uniformity, we use 245 liters per ton of molasses. If you multiply that, the total potential bioethanol volume that could be produced out of the total molasses produced in the country in 2017-2018, which is the highest so far in the last 5 years, is 276 million liters. Now, I would like also to take note that I'm discussing only the fuel ethanol production in the country, or fuel bioethanol, but we have also potable ethanol distilleries, like the one supplying your Tanduay and other alcoholic drinks. They are also using molasses actually, and there could be, well, of course, competition in terms of use of molasses. But these potable ethanol distilleries could import the raw material or molasses from outside the country. However, based on our policy, biofuels policy, we cannot import the raw material or feedstock for fuel ethanol production or even for biodiesel in the country to increase the very purpose of which is to increase the income, the job generation and economic activity in the rural areas where most likely logically our biofuels refinery and distillery would be located because of the agricultural input to these two emerging industries. So even assuming that there will be no diversion of molasses to potable ethanol, the maximum potential from the total molasses of 1.13 million is on 276 million liters. On the other hand, based on SRA, Sugar Regulatory Administration report in 2017, there are 5,000 hectares land dedicated for bioethanol. So these 5,000 hectares are all planted with sugarcane. There's a little bit higher yield of ethanol, of sugarcane in this dedicated 5,000 for bioethanol production. And here we estimated that the yield is about 75 tons sugarcane per hectare per year. And the conversion here is still 70 liters per ton of cane. So in short, the 5,000 hectares of land dedicated for sugarcane bioethanol could generate about 26.3 million liters of bioethanol. If you combine the total 5,000 hectares and 1.13 million liters, tons of molasses, it's only 302.3 million liters. Now, if you take a look at our plant capacity, the last column, we have a plant capacity of 380.5 million liters. The feedstock availability in the Philippines falls short with respect to our plant capacity. But if we look upward, the mandated bioethanol volume projected before, of course, in 2010, 2020, we have pandemic, and based on the report, it drastically decreased, even very low. But based on their projection before, if you just analyze this in terms of the projected volume for 2020, it's only 847.61 million liters, way below. So in terms of feedstock availability, it's only 75% of our requirement. So ito yung sinasabi natin kanina na kulang yung ating feedstock. So again, we're hoping that the research agenda and program of UPLB on the sugar production of sugarcane hybrid that would increase the cane yield per hectare and increase the sugar content so that we could increase our bioethanol output, could help the biofuel industry in coming up with its required feedstock requirement and ultimately the needed volume for our blending requirement, even at 10%. So how about, let me insert this. JAO is the Joint Administrative Order 2008, which states that feedstock for bioethanol production must only be sourced locally. So that is to boost the country rules economy. And if you take a look at the biodiesel feedstock, the total coconut or tons of coconut in the country is about 14.7. That is the data of PCA in 2014. It may not be significantly changed, or that is equivalent to 1.7 billion CNO. So even at 5%, kasi currently we are having 2%. I'm projected already here to show that we have enough feedstock for biodiesel. Even at 5% biodiesel blending, the requirement is only 575 million liters per year. And based on our available feedstock, it's only about 34% of the feedstock. So 575 is just 34% of our 1.7 billion oil. Of course, we have commitments for our exports, But in terms of availability locally, we have more than enough, even at 5%, even if we increase our blending from 2 to 5%. How about the capacity? Our capacity is 614.9 million liters per year. So we have more than capacity of our biodiesel refineries in the country. So there's no problem even at 5% in terms of our capacity or even in terms of feedstock. So that's again, as I have pointed out earlier, we don't have problem on the biodiesel feedstock in the country, unlike in our bioethanol situation. So how about the pricing? Um, on the left side, we have the bioethanol price index in January, I think January 2 and 3 to. Um, it's 56.36 per liter. So yan yan ang price index. There is an equation for that. And our gasoline sold in the country for February ranges from 41 to 48 pesos. So makikita natin dito yung price difference, no? Of ethanol and gasoline. So that's about, if we just minus this, about 15 pesos to 8 pesos. So the price difference ranges from 8 pesos to 15 pesos. The bioethanol price is quite high compared to gasoline. The imported ethanol is way, way below the gasoline price. So the range of 30, 35, somewhere there. And how about the biodiesel? The average biodiesel for 2020 is about 55 pesos per liter. And the ito February 21, diesel price ranges from 31 to 36 pesos per liter. So makikita natin dito that there is a price difference of 19 pesos to 24 pesos between diesel and our biodiesel. So for both bioethanol, for both bioethanol and biodiesel, there is an issue on price. So this is one of the reasons why they put on hold on the implementation of higher blending. That's the one of the reasons, of course, the price difference. Because if you blend the biofuels in our gasoline and diesel, although it may not be that significant, it will increase the composite price. However, because of the presence of biodiesel and the bioethanol, there are some researches that showed there is increase in mileage on a liter basis. So there could be an offsetting, and that is what we wanted to prove also in the next engagement of UPLB in testing vehicles in the country. On the right side, you can see the local diesel and biodiesel prices, and you can see the price difference ranges. It's historical data, and the historical data for bioethanol showed that lately, in the last 8-10 years, the price of bioethanol ranges from 44 to 61 pesos per liter. So the latest in now is only 56.89, but there was a time that the price rose to 60 pesos per liter. So the issue here is, especially on biodiesel, is the price. There is a Senate inquiry on the biodiesel production and in the country, and taking note of the supposed plan to increase the blending to 5 and to 10%. And there is also the study on how to work, UPLB study on how to come up with alternative feedstock. And we have a number of feedstock being studied, but I'll be presenting to you only one later on. So, are the objectives of biofuels law met? There are three other objectives, no? And this presentation will only focus on greenhouse gas emission reduction, which is linked to climate change or global warming or climate warming. And this is why I'll be discussing the Paris Agreement and the Philippine nationally determined contribution. The increase in rural employment and income is included in almost all of our studies in this project, um, evaluating how much income, additional employment brought about with the presence of biofuels, both bioethanol and biodiesel in the country. But again, as I have said, I'll just be focusing on greenhouse gas emission. And of course, the availability of alternative energy. We are focusing on alternative and complementary feedstock. So let me start with item number 2, the Paris Agreement and the Philippine National Determined Contribution. So what is the this Paris Agreement? This is a legally binding international treaty on climate change. It was adopted by 196 parties at Conference of Parties 21 in Paris. That was in December 12, 2015, and entered into force on November 4, 2016. And in 2020, countries, including Philippines, okay, dito pala yung aking cursor, submitted their plans for climate action known as Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDC. It used to be INDC, no? The intended nationally determined contribution, but in 2020 we have already confirmed, of course, with some volatility of support and funding, and we confirmed our commitment in reducing our greenhouse gas emission based on the 2020 to 2030 business as usual scenario. So Paris Agreement, it sets out the global framework to avoid dangerous climate change by limiting global warming to well below 2% and pursuing efforts to limit it to 1.5. So we targeted the below 2%, 2 degrees Celsius, 2 degrees Celsius, but the efforts now is towards limiting it to 1.5 degrees Celsius. There is a 5-year cycle, if you can see at the top. Every 5 years, the participating countries committed in reducing their greenhouse gas emissions try to assess if they could further increase their reduction commitment. And this was the latest one. The latest is still at 70% greenhouse gas reduction by 2030 as the commitment of the Philippines relative to its business as usual scenario of 2020 to 2030. 2000 to 2030. I will show to you later on our business as usual greenhouse gas emission as projected in 2010 up to 2030, where our 70% greenhouse gas emission reduction would be based. So again, there is a collateral on here provided that will be supported, especially financially, on our effort to reduce our emissions, because there will be really changes on how we produce and both in the agricultural and manufacturing and even our services and so many activities in our lives. So I know that climate change is already over talked or discussed, but let me just show to you this slide to provide introduction to the presentation leading to the greenhouse gas emission reduction research of the Chemical Engineering Department. So let me just define climate change. No? Climate change is considered as one of the biggest and most alarming environmental challenges of this generation. So what are the impacts of the climate change? So dito sa next slide, makikita natin that impacts could be here, higher temperatures, ito yung sinasabi na natin na global warming, more droughts, but on the other hand, wilder weather condition, changing rain and snow patterns. Because of increasing temperature, there will be melting of glaciers, less snowpack, and shrinking of sea ice, and definitely there will be rising of sea level. And the rest are some of other impacts of climate change. So our presentation today would focus on higher temperatures or the global warming reduction potential of biofuels program in the country. So let me present to you the greenhouse gas emission scenario. As you can see here, okay. Uh, okay. Philippines is producing 159 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. I'll show to you why we call it carbon dioxide equivalent later. So this is the global greenhouse gas emission, global emission, and this is the Philippine greenhouse gas emission. And our contribution, Philippine share or Philippine contribution to the global greenhouse gas emission is only 0.31%. Only 0.31%. So why join the bandwagon in the climate global agenda? And the next slide would show why we need to and why we ought to join the global community in addressing the problem on global warming. By the way, before that slide, let me emphasize that this is the 2010 Philippine greenhouse gas emission by source, and the transport sector contributes 16% of which. So this is the very reason why, even we have only 0.31% greenhouse gas contribution on the global scale, why Philippines should participate in the global climate action. Philippines is very vulnerable. We rank this in a study. I think the study is 1919 to 2018. We rank number 4. So Philippines is one of the countries most vulnerable to the impact of climate change. For me, that's already enough reason to join the bandwagon in addressing the global climate and join the global climate action in addressing this global warming problem. Now, I'll show to you the basis for the business as usual greenhouse gas emission, and the basis of that 70% reduction as commitment of, or NDC commitment of the Philippines. This is in 2010. As shown in earlier slide, we are producing, or we produce 159 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, and it is projected when we have a business as usual in 2030 that we will be producing almost double of 159, or that's about 300 million tons carbon dioxide equivalent. So it may not be that big. It may be almost in the vicinity of 0.3%, but still, again, we also ought to join the global community in addressing global warming. So let me introduce to you the life cycle. Very few slides only on life cycle assessment. This is a tool. No? When we started working on life cycle assessment on different bioethanol feedstock, it was the result of some of the questions on UPLB biofuels program. One of which is the sustainability, very much on the environmental sustainability. The question on energy security is also raised before, especially in the first half or the first decade of 2000. The question such as, if really indeed biofuels contributes to the reduction of greenhouse gas emission, or on energy security, questions such as if there's indeed a net energy balance in producing biofuels. So we thought of working with the life cycle assessment, and we started on sugarcane and sweet sorghum. And later on, the center, UPLB Life Cycle Assessment Center, even worked on other crops like the water footprint of industrial crops such as coconut, sugarcane, coffee, cacao, pineapple, banana, abaca. We are working even on the animal sector, the swine. So it all started with biofuels, but the life cycle research agenda and programs of UPLB already focus on the agricultural, much more of agricultural and manufacturing. Now we are conducting life cycle assessment to 12 sugar mills in the country. We have just finished the life cycle assessment of 4 ethanol distilleries, and ongoing is the 8 life cycle assessment of 8 bioethanol distilleries in the country. So yun ang ginagawa ngayon ng dalawang interdisciplinary study center here, working on bioethanol, sugarcane, and now we're working for the biodiesel industry. So let me provide you a short background on this life cycle assessment. No? I'm sure you have heard this, or probably life cycle you have heard this. No? It's a systematic technique to evaluate environmental aspect of the product or service system. Through all stages of its life cycle, it provides an adequate instrument for environmental decision support. So basically, it's a technique, an instrument, but it's a systematic, and it's also a tool. No? They call it also a tool that provides holistic inventory of environmental impacts of given product along its production chain, including relevant energy and material inputs and environmental discharges. So on the right side, you can see the coverage of life cycle assessment, from the extraction to material processing and shipment, to product manufacturing and packaging, product shipping, product use, product disposal and recycling, and that's the whole life cycle. So you try to evaluate. If you're focusing on carbon, you try to do the material and energy balance to compute the carbon and carbon equivalent carbon dioxide emission for the whole process. Or if you're working on water footprint, you work on estimate the water use. You do water inventory from the extraction down to product disposal and recycling. Or if you do energetics, ganun din, no? If you work on the energy inventory, so you do the energy balance and see how much would the net energy would be derived out of the production of the product or of services. So next is the LCA framework. Basically, the LCA framework is composed of this. You start with the setting your goal and scope. You define your goal and scope. So you define here basically your boundaries. No? When we started LCA, we thought of what should be the proper, what should be the right or the correct. Is there a fixed rule on setting the boundaries? But in our discussions and our consultations, you can set any boundary. But normally we want to start, especially on biofuels, from the plantation or source of raw material or feedstock down to the production of the biofuels. So you define here the scope or the boundary. And there is one term that I would like to use, the functional unit. The functional unit is an expression, no? Parang an expression that will be used common to all. Normally you express that in terms of carbon dioxide emitted per liter of fuel, or probably carbon dioxide emission per megajoules in terms of energy. And we are using megajoule expression here. So inventory analysis, what do we do here? This is where we look for data, inventory of data, both on the plantation side of sugarcane, for example, of coconut, and also the data for the processing, the chemicals used, the materials used, etc. It is also here that we seek and determine for the greenhouse gas potential coefficients or carbon dioxide emissions coefficient. Um, and the third one is the impact assessment. Ito na yung tinitingnan natin mga impact, and we are looking at the climate change as the midpoint impact in this presentation, but there are also other impacts, midpoint impacts and endpoint impacts, which I will show you later. Inside the framework is interpretation, which you can use side by side, side by side with any of these three parts of the frameworks. The direct application are the following. It could be in terms of product development and improvement when for the manufacturing sector. It could be strategic planning for our government in terms of its impositions. It could be a public policy through for our legislators and for our regulators. It could be also in terms of marketing, showing, for example, the lower carbon footprint of your product. It's a marketing tool, and others. So there are many direct applications of the life cycle assessment. So here's the life cycle impact categories. As I have pointed out, this is the midpoint category, and this is the endpoint. So madami ito, no? Sa midpoint, which we normally use. Like this one, we are now we will be presenting on the climate change, but we have initial work also. One of our teammates did his master's work on the initial acidification and eutrophication for the sugar crystal production. But still, there are others that could also be used as midpoint. And of course, the endpoint could be on human health, natural environment, or natural resources. So we will be focusing on the climate change, specifically on global warming. So with that, I'll be introducing to you the global warming potential. And let me introduce to you the climate change in terms of global warming potential. The global warming potential is a relative metric.
Target for following year probably. Ito naman pong mga po, ito lang po yung mga project na
Meron nagsasabay. The
Sir
global
Rex, go
warming
ahead.
potential is a relative measure of how much heat a greenhouse gas drop in the atmosphere. So when a gas drops, or greenhouse gas drops, there is increase in temperature. In short, in a global scale, there is increase in Earth's temperature. This compares to the amount of heat drop by a certain mass of gas in question to the amount of heat drop by similar mass of carbon dioxide. So ang ginawa dito na baseline is the heat drop of carbon dioxide is used as the baseline on 1. And if you compare the amount of heat drop in methane, it's 28 more than carbon dioxide. So ganun lang kasimple yung natin i-interpret yan. It's 28 more potent in dropping heat. And for nitrous oxide, 265. Okay. So the expression of carbon dioxide equivalent, dito nanggaling yon, no? Because you express methane in terms of carbon dioxide equivalent. You express nitrous oxide in terms of carbon dioxide equivalent. And when you total all of this, okay, so you call it carbon dioxide equivalent. So it's not total carbon dioxide, but there are presence of methane and nitrous oxide that were accounted and expressed in terms of carbon dioxide. So that's why carbon dioxide equivalent. So let me present to you the carbon footprint. Very uh, introductory. When you say carbon footprint, it's synonymous with global warming potential or carbon dioxide emission. No? So nag-interchange yung mga terms na yan. So sinabi mo global warming potential, carbon footprint, carbon dioxide emission, na-interchange yan. So carbon footprint is the total set of greenhouse gas emission caused by an individual, event, organization, product expressed as carbon dioxide equivalent, as I have mentioned. Carbon footprint is being calculated, one, to manage the footprint, okay, and reduce the emission over time. So it's only when you know your carbon footprint or carbon dioxide emission that you can manage and potentially reduce. Without knowing it, you can start with nowhere. And basically, when you do carbon life cycle assessment, hotspots are determined. Ibig sabihin, saan ang mataas na carbon dioxide emission in the whole supply chain, the whole process, or the whole production system. So the hotspots would, being the highest or bigger, would give an idea where to focus in reducing or managing your emission. So, okay, this is now the part of the research output of UPLB, the biodiesel. I'll start with biodiesel carbon footprint and greenhouse gas reduction potential. So I'll be presenting to you two of our outputs here. I'll start first with the coconut. There are two projects supported this work. The results are almost the same, very near, but I'll just present to you this UPLB project handled by the Chemical Engineering Department, titled Impact of Higher Blending or Blended Biodiesel on the Philippine Coconut Industry. This is funded by NEDA through the funds of USAID Energy Policy Program. It ended in 2016. And there's another new one, project very related to this, the result of which is very also close. The socio-economic environmental impact of biodiesel production in the country, funded by the Department of Energy National Biofuels Board. It's just completed last year. The other one is, so coconut is our feedstock. The other one as an alternative feedstock to complement, potentially complement, is the soybean. We have a project handled by the department, so UPLB project, boosting farmers' income through an integrated soybean production for food and fuel, an environmental assessment, technical, and economic study. So in this project, we did the technical conversion work on soybean conversion to biodiesel. It also includes the environmental, the greenhouse gas emission assessment and its potential in reducing CO2 emission, as well as the economic study. This was funded by the Department of Agriculture, Bureau of Agricultural Research, and ended last 2018. So as you can see here, the carbon footprint of coconut is about 39.34 grams carbon dioxide equivalent per megajoule. The potential greenhouse gas reduction is 53%, while soybean has a carbon footprint of 49.33 grams carbon dioxide equivalent per megajoule, and the potential greenhouse gas reduction is 41%. There were some assumptions used here, of course, in this project. Basically, both used two-stage transesterification, and what else? Using of coal as energy source in the steam production. What else? Well, in soybean, we have four production systems. We have different four combinations. And we also did the assessment for community-based, yung mga maliliit lang, other than the commercial scale. Then let me present to you the annual greenhouse gas saving scenario using cocoa biodiesel at different blending. Makikita natin dito that in 2016, this is the blue is 2%, red is 5%, then yellow-green is 10%, violet is 20%. In 2016, at 2% blending, the annual greenhouse gas savings in terms of tons carbon dioxide is about 250,000. Yan. And if you look up to 2030, if we will not change the blending, okay, halos insignificant ang increase niya in terms of annual greenhouse gas savings. Now, the red one, if we have increased the blending in 2016 to 5%, kasi as planned, it should be already 5% in 2015, there could be more than about 600,000 tons of carbon dioxide per year for our annual greenhouse gas savings. And in 2020, you can see here, as planned, it should have been already 10%. So there will be really a dramatic increase in terms of greenhouse gas savings if we'll be able to increase our blending from the current 2%, 5%, 10%. The blue lines here is the biodiesel demand. So you can easily compute for 2%, 5%, 10%, and 20% biodiesel blending based on this diesel demand. So the cocoa biodiesel again has a greenhouse gas emission reduction of 53%. So what are recommendations from the study? Towards better environmental footprint, we have to use renewable sources of energy to replace fossil-derived fuels such as coal to power our processing plants. And we've got to use, for biodiesel, we've got to use our coconut waste, coconut husk. In sugar kasi ginagamit yung bagas. The shells for power generation instead of using coal, and even processing the waste as co-product to promote livelihood in the rural communities. Now, having economic value, we should not already call them waste as long as we could convert and use them to produce something, substitute something, especially on the production of heat and power in our processing plants. The biodiesel production efficiency can further be improved through intensive research. We believe that research and development, we can still improve its footprint, which should result into lower chemical use because it's one of the reasons why, or contributory to carbon emission, the chemicals, as well as the power, especially when you're using coal. So R&D is needed in order to further reduce the carbon footprint or increase the greenhouse gas emission reduction for the biodiesel production in the country. And develop low carbon alternative feedstock. No, the Department of Chemical Engineering has several alternative feedstock for biodiesel production in the country. But of course, it haven't reached the commercial or even to the pilot scale, but we've been working on microalgae. We have been working on oil before, used cooking oil. Nagawa din natin yan. We have project also on palm, looking at potential of palm. These are some of the alternative feedstocks that we look into research as alternative to coconut. Okay. So how about bioethanol footprint, carbon footprint, and greenhouse gas potential? Let me show to you two feedstocks. I'll start from the right side. We have the sugarcane molasses. By the way, the data here in sugarcane and molasses are actual data from the industry. Ito yung um, data na nakuha namin in our socioeconomic and environmental impact study on the bioethanol production in the Philippines. We could not reveal it because of our confidentiality agreement, but I could say that there is a quite significant of 76% greenhouse gas reduction in the country when we use sugarcane and molasses, with a carbon footprint of only 17 grams carbon dioxide equivalent per megajoule. So this is a project, UPLB project, managed, implemented by the Department of Chemical Engineering. The socio-economic and environmental impact of bioethanol production in the Philippines, phase one. It covers 4 ethanol distillery, and we are currently finalizing, almost ending the same study, phase 2, for 8 ethanol distilleries in the country. So after this project, we could already say that we have already assessed almost all, if not all, carbon emission reduction potential of ethanol distilleries in the country. So we're quite busy, and it's good that we have a good team. Because of our study, because of this study, the Sugar Regulatory Administration commissioned us to do the same socioeconomic and environmental impact of sugarcane or sugar crystal production in the country, starting with 12 sugar mills. So we're very fortunate also that the industry opened to us, of course, with all the confidentiality agreement on their process and process details. But it's a good learning for us, especially for faculty and research assistant and reps in the department, in doing such an actual work, working with our industry, the ethanol and sugarcane industry in the country. So all in all, we are covering 24, 12 and the 12, yes, 24 sugar mills and ethanol distilleries in the country. Hopefully, all of them would provide us the data, because of course, there is always that inhibition of giving us their information that defines probably their competitiveness. But again, we are very committed on the confidentiality of this data and information. So sweet sorghum is a theoretical. No? This is the result that you will show here are theoretical. We have been working on sweet sorghum for a long time on its commercialization. And on last February, I think 11, we had a workshop. We presented this project, feasibilities, the feasibility of the establishment of a commercial sweet sorghum bioethanol processing in the country, which is funded by UP, Philippine Energy Research and Policy Institute, championed by and fund provider, Senator Win Gatchalian. It should end this month. We are wrapping up our report, and hopefully we'll be able to submit this coming Friday. And the assumption here, this is not actual data, unlike in our sugarcane and the molasses. So it's still a little bit ideal. One of the assumptions here that probably provided a little higher reduction potential and lower carbon footprint is that we assume a 60% recovery of carbon dioxide production in defermentation. So malaki kasing tulong yan in terms of savings. While the sugarcane and molasses, a number of of ethanol distilleries did not reach the point of 60% recovery. So yun lang ang probably the difference in terms of its evaluation. So the carbon footprint of sweet sorghum bioethanol production is about 14 grams carbon dioxide equivalent per megajoule, and the potential greenhouse gas reduction potential is 89%. But I would like to say that for sugarcane and molasses, 76% is a good number. I think we should be proud that we are having this greenhouse gas reduction potential for our ethanol production in the country using sugarcane and sugarcane molasses. So this is the greenhouse gas emission reduction estimation for the Philippine bioethanol industry starting from 2009 to 2008. Medyo bumaba dito, ano? Makita mo yung annual greenhouse gas avoidance or savings in terms of tons per year, 1,000 tons per year bumaba because the volume from 2009 to 2011, the local volume production decreased. But there was an increasing in terms of avoidance up to 2018. Okay, so are there still room for improvement? Yes, definitely. No? Towards a better environmental footprint for our bioethanol industry. Okay, let me start with the significant greenhouse gas emission reduction may be attained through development of high-yielding varieties of sugarcane and application of optimal sugarcane cultivation practices and fertilizer rates. If we could increase our cane yield, then the footprint will be less. If we will be able to use optimal fertilization and optimal activities, that would reduce our footprint also. The use of organic fertilizer would also lower the carbon footprint of sugarcane cultivation. Agricultural waste and residues such as bagasse, which is actually used ngayon, agricultural waste, the waste in the distillation process, which is also used ngayon in anaerobic digestion, could be used as feedstock for power generation. But if we could maximize the use of bagasse as well as the distillery slumps, that would provide us an improved carbon footprint, a good substitute for coal. Probably in our assessment, 25 to 40% of the coal is replaced by our wastewater when we use the wastewater as feedstock for our biogas production or anaerobic digestion. Then molasses as feedstock for bioethanol production has lower carbon footprint compared to sugarcane stock. Ito yung na-discover namin lately. No? Of course, initially we have the thought of stock is better than molasses. And when we try to assess the reason why, it's because the majority of the carbon footprint of sugarcane cultivation, when allocated, goes to the sugar mill for sugar crystal production, while molasses having lower economic value will have a lower allocation in terms of carbon footprint. So ganun ang lumabas sa ating study. When you say allocation, when you produce, for example, when you use sugarcane and produce sugarcane crystal and molasses, you get the total carbon footprint in producing these two. And based on the economic value, ina-allocate mo siya, dinidivide mong total emission. Like for example, total sugar crystals times the price of crystal per ton siya o per kilo. Against, so total tonnage of your molasses times the price of your molasses. And the ratio of which is used to allocate. This is what we call economic allocation. There's also what we call energy allocation or mass allocation. But in here we use economic allocation. Now, let me present you two last slides, and this is very important because if you could remember, the problem in our bioethanol is that we lack feedstock, we lack capacity, but supposedly in 2020, we should have already implemented 20% blending, or we call it E20. So we were commissioned by US Grains, the US Grains Council in 2018. And I was asked to present the result in the US. This commission work on entitled Ethanol in the Philippines Injecting Octane into the It's basically question, is it possible to implement E20. It was completed in 2018, and we use a multi-criteria, and we tried to determine what are the criteria to be considered. So we use the first one should be energy. No? We use the multiple criteria such as itong energy security, food security, economic cost, rural economy, this. The second one is how about importing? Okay, how about importing molasses and process the molasses in the country and produce the needed ethanol volume so that we'll be able to suffice the needed volume for E20. That's one option. E20E. How about importing to complement the local? With a policy, of course, Kulatila, that we should consume first, buy first a local before importing. So why import all the difference between local and the mandated volume? And the last one is E20 for a mix 50% importing 50% molasses and 50% ethanol. And our results showed that we have more benefit in terms of this criteria if we import ngayon, if we import the difference of E20 implementation in the country. So there are some only also I would like to qualify that there are some collectilia that we would like to impose here, like local ethanol produced should be taken first. There should be a first dispatch. And UPLB has a 10-year biofuels feedstock program on how to increase our sugarcane yield, increase our sugarcane sugar content, uh, increase our or develop sweet sorghum as complementary feedstock because we don't want to be totally dependent on imported fuel. So a transition period of about 7 years up to 10 years would be needed if only will be supported. UPLB will be supported in its breeding program with our partners from the College of Agriculture, specifically the Institute of Plant Breeding. So that's the collectilia that I would like to emphasize. And if we import the additional needed volume to implement E20, these are the benefits. No? We tried to estimate, although medyo mataas ito, the greenhouse gas avoidance for 2020 would be 3.4 million tons. For the span of 2020 to 2030 would be about 28.2 million tons carbon dioxide equivalent. The foreign exchange savings would be 18 billion. Instead of importing Asia, you import ethanol na mas mura. So there is foreign exchange savings. There will be an added employment of about 16,877. And other than these three big, there will be again a more significant contribution to our energy mix as a renewable source of energy. When we import ethanol, there will be no investment. There will be no needed additional distillery. And it would improve our trade balance because there will be foreign exchange. So I think I would end here. Sorry, medyo mahaba pala yung ginawa sa aking presentation. Thank you very much, Bea and Elaine, for making this presentation and your help in getting the data. Thank you very much for listening. I hope wala akong major penalty dito, RC. I surpassed 1 hour.
Thank you very much, Dr. Demafelis, for a very comprehensive discussion on the status of biofuel in the Philippines. Your team's initiative and effort to meet the target blend to comply with RA 9367 really help our government, especially for fuel source or supply stability, which is much related to energy security in the Philippines. So before we proceed to the open forum, may I recognize first the presence of our former Dean, Dr. Arnold Elepanio, our OIC Dean, Dr. Myra Borines, and of course, our Professor Emeritus, Dr. Javita Movillon. Thank you very much po sa pag-attend sa ating webinar. Okay po. So, ready na po, Sir Rex, for the questions?
Yes, kasama ko rin sila.
Okay po, sir.
Dean
So
Arnold is
this
part of the team, Dr.
So
Mobilion.
this is the first question, sir. I think you already mentioned this, but I siguro pwede pong i-elaborate. Is the impact of biofuels in fuel prices right now a positive or a negative, given the current high price of petroleum products?
Well, if you just look at the pricing, both biofuels, the bioethanol and biodiesel, have higher price compared to gasoline and diesel respectively. What we cannot see are the positive impact on the engines and mileage that we wanted to prove because we are now finalizing our agreement with international organization and vehicle testing. So we wanted to show that there is an extra mile, kahit meron kang extra pay, meron kang extra mile, and we do the economic study to show that there could be offsetting or probably it's better off. So in terms of pricing, we wanted to prove that, but in terms of environmental, there's really a great positive impact to the country, as well as of course the socio-economic aspect, generating jobs. So probably that's the safest answer that I could frame.
Thank you very much, Sir Rex, for that answer. So another question, Sir Rex. Actually, we already were not able to obtain the biofuel blends, right? So do we have a new projection or do we have a new roadmap for biofuels?
Yes, I would like to again thanks our colleague in the Department of Energy, specifically Engineer Rubin de Guzman. Kinuha ko lang to sa kanya. No? I would like to share this. This is now the latest biofuels roadmap, and we're working on vehicle testing basically because there is this program that by 2023 or probably earlier, the implementation of 20% lending or E20. And here, if you can see, there is already the B5 part of the program for medium term within 2019 to 2022. This is the latest so far. No? Nakita, it was reported by Engineer De Guzman of the Department of Energy and National Biofuels Board last February 11 when we presented our work on sweet sorghum here in UPLB. So ito yan, ito yung latest.
Okay. Thank you, Sir Rex, for sharing. So now we know that we already have the roadmap. So yung target blend po natin, baka talagang ma-reach na po natin. Okay. So another question, Sir Rex. In your opinion, Sir Rex, what are the provisions of the current law that you think should be amended based on the problems encountered during the implementation?
Well, you know, not because I'm a professor and researcher in UPLB, but I think the government should really provide us not just enough research fund to develop biofuels, not in both agricultural and processing side. No? Our breeders, Institute of Plant Breeding, they have 40 potential accessions of sugarcane that are high yielding as well as high sugar content. So that would really improve our production volume as well as improve the pricing. No? On the processing side, we still have other big opportunities. Actually, one of our master's students will be working on optimization of distillation and ethanol production. And we are very hopeful that, in fact, because of our plan to present this, the same presentation to the National Biofuels Board, we will be able to and provide us enough support more than enough support. Like for example, our breeding program requires almost half a billion pesos to develop a 10-year program. That's only 50 million pesos per year, no? So we need to pitch this, although we have already pitched with Senator Gatchalian. But I think R&D is the key. R&D is the way to improve our biofuels to be competitive, to reduce its price, as well as to increase the availability of feedstock. And I do believe that we have enough people, very talented in UPLB, both on the agricultural and processing side, who could help the national government improve the biofuels program.
Thank you very much, Sir Rex. For the last, really, it's not a question, but what is your message to our researchers, or we have young researchers here, that can inspire them to pursue researches in biofuels?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank our researchers, na yung ating partners, our faculty, our reps, and our researchers in the biofuels team and life cycle team. I'm so impressed with them. I'm so thankful that they're part of the team. I'm also thankful that they joined us, and thankful that a number of them work on biofuels and life cycle in their master thesis. But for those young researchers, well, maybe biofuels is one of the areas of research, but to tell you frankly, there is almost minimal research funding support for biofuels in the country ngayon. We're just fortunate that the biofuel industry, the private sector itself, commissioned us to work on these big programs or big projects, both for ethanol and sugarcane production. Uh, Again, biofuels may be one of the research areas. I'm not discouraging you, but I could not also encourage you because of the current situation. But for me, what is very important is for you and for your mentor, maybe your advisor or your senior faculty, to draft, no, and to craft a research agenda where would suit to the mandate and the expertise or inclination, research inclination of every faculty and reps in the college and the whole university. There are, when I was the vice chancellor, there are many potential areas where we could work with or work in. So biofuels is just one. Life cycle could be applied to so many areas. And I do believe that life cycle, it's just at its infancy stage, while the biofuels is already maybe in its midlife. There is so much opportunity in life cycle assessment. Um, Hopefully, next time we'll be able to offer the course on systems engineering using life cycle and using our two software, Gabi and Sima Pro, a special topic that will be open to all engineering students. So nahingi na ako sa chairman ng offering ito a special topic, but this will be offered to all engineering programs. We have also program in the UPLB Interdisciplinary Life Cycle Assessment that we will provide access to CIMA Pro to all units that we're working on life cycle, as well as conduct training on life cycle. Now we are working on using softwares, and it's very encouraging, very inspiring, no? That we are using the software provided by our partners in trying to optimize, trying to increase the production and income of our sugar industry and ethanol industry. Hopefully, we will be successful in this. And by the time, I will encourage you to work with us once medyo clear na yung itong initiative natin, because I could see there are a lot of opportunities not only for chemical engineering but also for other engineering fields in the college, and probably in the also in other colleges, especially sa economics and College of Agriculture. So well, the biofuels program of the university, medyo mahaba na rin yung nalakbay niya. And there are many research areas na hindi pa nagawa. Uh, we have minimal funding support so far ngayon, for our biofuels research program in the country. Yun lang, RC. That's the truth and fair assessment.
Thank you very much, Sir Rex. And thank you, Sir Rex, for giving your time with us today and for accepting our invitation to be the first speaker for the CEAT webinar series for this week-long celebration of our 109th CEAT anniversary. Thank you very much. So now, may we request all participants to open their videos para sa ating photo op. So naandito po si Miss Jane to take our photo with our guest speaker, Sir Rex. Okay. Okay, Sir Rex, may we request to yung stop sharing po muna yung slide.
Okay, sige please. So,
Thank
sige.
you po.
Okay.
Okay, Jane, are you ready?
Wait lang po, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Pahingi na lang mamaya.
Yes, Sir Rex. Tag na lang po, Sir Rex.
Sige.
Jane, okay?
Okay po.
Okay.
First page po.
Okay. Smile lang po tayo lahat.
3. Next.
Okay, next page. Sawa po kayong mga ngawit kumiti.
2, 3.
Yung iba nakamas pero kitang-kitang nakangiti. Oh, di ba?
106 pala tayo. Madami na ito.
Yes, sir.
Wait. Hintayin ko lang po yung mga camera po sa third page.
Okay.
Red. 1, 2, 3. Fourth page po.
May fourth page. Sige, go ahead, Jane.
Hanggang 5 po tayo. Apo, marami-rami po eh. And last po.
Okay, last page. Hindi ko alam kasama pa rin kami pero nangiti pa rin kami, Jane, ha?
Okay na po.
Okay, thank you, Jane. So before we end this webinar, so I just want to thank the 112 participants that we have right now. So maraming salamat po sa pag-attend sa first webinar series natin. And of course, assistance ng ating Dean's Office, led by our OIC Dean, Dr. Myra Borines, and of course, Miss Jane for the technicals. Thank you very much. And for CEAT and Department of Chemical Engineering Socials Committee to make this event possible. Thank you very much. And also to our chair for gracing the event, Dr. Detras. Maraming salamat po sa inyong time. And lastly, to our guest speaker, Sir Rex. Maraming salamat po. Lagi po kayong available. No, wala pong hindi lagi. So lagi pong oo. So maraming salamat po, Sir Rex, and hopefully mai-share pa po natin 'to sa sa ating bansa sa different platforms para ma-share ang biofuels. Okay? So that concludes our webinar today. We also have a webinar tomorrow. Just register. So we have a poster for that. Just check out the poster. So see you all tomorrow. Keep safe and have a good lunch. Bye.
Thank you, Sir Rex.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Rex.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Movie. Thank you,
Thank
Sir.
you po.
Sir Rex, Sir Arnold, Ma'am
Thank you po.
Myra. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Sir RC. Thank you, Sir Rex.
Salamat.